It actually gives me great pleasure. I met the minister up in Webequie. I think it was his first trip up there to that community not that long ago. Minister Pirie was born and raised at the Porcupine Camp, as it is known. He's married with 2 children and has 3 grandchildren. He's a former mining executive with over 35 years of experience in the industry, 17 of those years in senior levels. That includes Chief Financial Officer and Chief Executive Officer at Placer Dome Canada. In Timmins, he has also co-chaired the local United Way campaign and served on local hospital boards and community associations. He's also served as chairman of the Board of Governors for the Northern College. He served as mayor of Timmins before being elected to provincial office this past June, and was appointed Minister of Mines and responsible for the Ring of Fire developments by Premier Doug Ford. Help me welcome Minister Pirie to the stage.
Hello and welcome all. I'm thrilled to be here speaking with you today at the Central Canada Resource Expo. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. I want to especially thank Glenn Dreadhart. He can't be too far. There he is. And Michael Fox for inviting me to be a part of this event that includes Chief Peter Collins of Fort William First Nation, Chief Cornelius Wabas of Webequie First Nation, and other industry leaders that are here with us today. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the city of Thunder Bay is located on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples of Fort William First Nation, signatory to the Robinson-Superior Treaty of 1850. I want to show my respect for their contributions and recognize the role of treaty making in what it is now Ontario. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they are still very relevant. Now, as you heard in my introduction, I was raised in Timmins. Actually, I was raised in the mine site villages of Dome and Domex in the shadow of the headframe of the Dome mine. It was a family of 7, 5 boys, 2 girls, and we actually thought we lived in paradise. I must say, every single, and I've been many of them, the First Nations communities are physically more beautiful than Dome and Domex, because physically these First Nations communities are surrounded usually on the shores of beautiful rivers or beautiful lakes, and they're actually, from my perspective, from where I grew up, absolutely beautiful places physically to live. There's a couple things that I want to talk about, and the first thing is this. In the mining industry, there's employed 45,000 people. And as you know, the 45,000 people are largely employed in Northern Ontario. And by Northern Ontario, I mean from North Bay and Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie to Thunder Bay, north of there, 45,000 people. In the auto sector, there's round numbers about 90,000 people in the auto industry. And as we know, they're all south of North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, Sudbury, and Thunder Bay. Now, Southern Ontario holds 9/10 of the population, and the economy in Southern Canada is driven by 90,000 people that contain 9/10 of the population of Ontario. Now, put that into perspective. Do you really realize how important mining is in Canada? Do you really realize how important mining is in Northern Ontario, with 45,000 people employed with 1/10 of the population? Does everybody here realize how important you are? Every single citizen, Indigenous, everybody. Do you realize the impact we have on the economy? Now, I want to stress that. I'll be talking a couple of very important themes in this, and I want people to listen to this very, very carefully. I was elected June 2nd. I was sworn in on June 28th as an MPP, and on June 29th, I was sworn in as the Minister of Mines. Within the first week, I was at a conference that was an energy and mines conference in St. John's. and that was a conference that was a national conference. Important, again, to understand this. The speaker was Minister Wilkinson with NRCan. And what he said was music to my ears. He focused on three things, and he spoke with a sense of urgency. He talked about the energy crisis globally that was caused by the invasion of Russia and the Ukraine. And we know what has happened since that time. And we applaud, of course, what the Ukrainians have just done in the last week with recapturing territories about the size of Lithuania. A huge offensive. I'm here as the Minister of Mines, but every single mining person understands how important energy is. If you're thinking about you're developing a mine, you're going to say, where do we have the power? Where is the power going to come from? I was intimately involved in that discussion, of course, with Placer Dome. And the west side with Musselwhite. We built that road, we built the power transmission line, and dead end in Musselwhite. Very expensive capital project, and not the most efficient way to get transmission power up a line. We had serious conversations about wheeling the power from Manitoba through a power corridor into that area, so we could buy our power from Manitoba at about 3.2 cents a kilowatt hour. That's the cost of producing it. At the Detour Lake mine, in the late 90s, we were trying to survive in depressed gold prices, and we were 8 miles away from the Renebe mine, which is about 9 miles away inside Quebec. And the cost of generating power at that place was through the Bay James power, of course, 2.8 cents a kilowatt hour. Both times in those conversations, we were refused to do that because power, as every political jurisdiction knows, is a matter of sovereignty. Germany just learned that when they cut off the natural gas, and Ontario views their power in a very similar fashion. If you lose your ability to control your power independently, it's a threat to your sovereignty. If you lose your sovereignty, if you can't do that, and of course, one of the big issues that had to be faced by the Minister of Energy was, in fact, to unwind some of these very, very expensive power contracts that were put in place by the Liberals, subsidizing wind at about 78 cents a kilowatt hour, and solar panels at about 52 cents a kilowatt hour, because they're not sustainable. You lose your economic viability. And if you lose your economic ability, you lose your ability to fund the programs that you need to fund within the province. So energy is a key component of mining, without a doubt. Everybody in this room has an idea about what it would take to, in fact, if you had to park your gas car, your vehicle that runs on gasoline right now, and plug it into a socket. Do you think any hydro would come out of it? Would any electricity come out of it? None. A couple years ago, hydro thought they had enough energy. In recent conversations, they realize they don't, that they're way behind. The opportunity, there's ample opportunity in especially northwestern Ontario, northeastern Ontario, to generate hydroelectric power. And of course, with full cooperation, and in fact, these projects will be driven by the Indigenous people. Five Nations Energy is a power transmission company in northeastern Ontario, 100% Indigenous owned. So you have to realize that the Indigenous people are a big part, always will, always, and I would be wrong if I said they always have been. They should have been, but they haven't been, but they certainly are now in every single topic I'm talking about. The Musselwhite, let's go back to that for a minute. That power was sent to Musselwhite, and I thought actually when the Victor Diamond Mine was brought into production, the hydro line, and it was built by Five Nations Energy, and ended up over Victor. I thought the logical thing when they'd run a line from Musselwhite Mine right across over to the Victor Diamond and mines, and that would have passed through the Ring of Fire, and it would have provided the opportunity to run lines north and south to put power into the Indigenous communities in that Ring of Fire area. It's a big part of one of the pillars of the critical mineral strategy is to develop the roads in partnership with the Indigenous peoples and power the communities. Why do you have to get to power into the communities? The power is diesel generated right now, and diesel generation is usually was most efficiently made possible by transporting the diesel on winter roads through to these communities. As everybody knows, the winter roads are not sustainable. They're not reliable. And flying in diesel into these communities is not going to be sustainable. There is a better solution. So understand when Minister Wilkinson is talking about the crisis in energy and what has to be done, the important role that the critical mineral strategy plays in that strategy, as well as the Indigenous people across the north that are going to help make this happen. The second thing that he talked about was climate change, the urgency to tackle climate change. Again, music to my ears. Because if we're going to tackle the climate change crisis, we have to get off the fossil fuels. The key to fossil fuels, of course, there are the critical minerals that we're focusing in this conversation, and we talk about them specifically in the Ring of Fire, but we know that they are critical minerals. There are critical minerals that are all across Northern Ontario. But ultimately, the bulk of them will be found in the Ring of Fire. We know that if we're going to meet our climate objectives, we cannot meet them without accessing the minerals that are included in the Ring of Fire. We know that these minerals have to be mined. So, de facto, if we're going to be green, we gotta be mining. If we're going to be green, we gotta be mining. You have to mine these minerals. There's no other way to get these minerals other than mining. Everybody that's in this conference is involved in the solution that will be required, the solutions that will have to be developed to get these minerals out of the ground. Principally, the Indigenous people. Principally, the Indigenous people. Because we know nothing is going to happen without the Indigenous people being involved in these industries. Full stop. Full partnership. The upside, of course, with that is that we'll be developing these projects. They'll be led by the Indigenous peoples. They will they'll be transformed, as Michael said, from being undervalued peoples in our land to peoples that will be the global leaders to transform our economy and achieve our green objectives. Hell of an opportunity, and it will happen. The third thing that Minister Wilkins talked about was transforming the economy into a green economy. The requirement to do that. The focus on critical minerals. Again, music to my ears, again, as a mining guy. As I just said, we cannot be green without mining. What does that mean? That means that makes us into good guys. I've said that earlier in my earlier remarks. And why is this important? Because for years, we weren't viewed as being good guys. And I know I was a few marks this morning, I talked about, Avatar and such like that, but it's the truth. That in that movie, the mining guys are the bad guys. The bad guys. Now, we can't achieve our goals without mining. Why is it, again, and why I'm emphasizing this so much about the fact how important mining is and how important it is that we view ourselves as the good guys. It goes back to the length of time it takes to get a mine permitted in this province. When Kidd Creek was discovered, 1968, huge polymetallic deposit, it was put into production within 3 years. 3 years. How did it go from 3 years to averaging 15 to 20 years to put a mine into production? Because we lost our mandate from the people of Ontario and the citizens of Ontario to mine. It wasn't important. It's important now. It's very important if we're going to achieve our climate goals, if we're going to be a green economy, if we're going to energize this province. It's important now, and it's part of my mandate that we move from where we are from a mining jurisdiction to being the #1 mining jurisdiction globally. Everybody, every single person in this auditorium, and everybody in Northern Ontario, and in fact, I hope in Southern Ontario, realizes how important this activity is. We must get the mandate back from the people of Ontario. They should be clamoring at us. Why is it taking so long to develop these projects? How do you go from 3 years to 20 years? There's a lot of years. There's a lot of reasons why. Some of them were intentional. There's no doubt about that. And some of them were you'd have to say, accidents or unintended consequences. Intentional. The Liberal government, the provincial Liberal government, did not want to see mining develop, or for that matter, any resources in Northern Ontario. Our mining industry fell off the cliff. Our forestry industry, we saw that happen in Western Ontario, fell off the cliff. If there was a strategy that was purposely designed to end the resource industry, it couldn't have been better developed by the Liberals, and I point directly at them because it was the Premier of Ontario, Premier McGuinty's, that said, our economy is not going to be developed by people that dig holes in the ground. Well, guess what? It is going to be defined by people who dig holes in the ground. And I am very passionate about this because for years, no one has stood up and said, we are important. And as the Minister of Mines, it's the single ministry. I'm not mining and blah, 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 blah. I'm the Minister of Mines. And I'm very proud of that. My background is all about mining. It must be understood how important mining is, what this mandate means to be successful with this mandate. So that was something that happened. That was a purposeful objective. I'll talk about one of the examples of that. Kidd Creek smelter was lost in that period of time. The world's first or second best smelter globally, clean environmentally. We could be producing critical minerals with that smelter right now if it was still open. but it was tore down. And who was there to defend us? Absolutely nobody. 600 direct jobs were lost. I can't imagine losing 600 jobs in Southern Ontario without somebody standing up and saying, this can't happen. And nobody made any noise. Well, we're going to make noise. 600 jobs. We've declined, and why am I involved in politics? Why did I run for the mayor? Why am I involved in provincial politics? Because we had declining populations for years and years and years, for 30 years, both not only in Timmins, but all across northwestern Ontario. Why am I so excited to be at this conference here this week? Because it focused on forestry, but it's the first time it's focused on mining. There's a buzz. There's a buzz of business around this conference. Now, let's go back now. An unintended consequence. In 2004, there was a ruling by the Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin about the duty to consult. The duty to consult is critical. It was the right decision. It was the right thing to do. When I talked to Chief Justice McLaughlin, I thought, to tell you the truth, there would be a big strategy. I thought, boy, there's going to be a strategy around here because this is a fundamental decision. It's a fundamental change that defines our relationships with the Indigenous people. And I thought I was going to hear, well, yeah, we're going to move to an elected Senate. Now, this is a view as a citizen, not as an MPP, and certainly not a view of a Minister of the Mines. This is just a strategy that I thought would unfold. An elected Senate, and of course, you can imagine that was going to be representation would be based on geographical area, and so the Indigenous peoples of our land would be actually in the government. I thought I was going to hear something like that, and I didn't. The answer that I received from the Chief Justice was, "It's not a veto." That's your answer. It's not a veto. And that speaks volumes. That means as a peoples, Indigenous peoples, miners, ordinary citizens, we got to figure this out. We've got to figure this out. So consequently, some people have figured it out. They said, this is how you define this relationship. This is how you develop. This is how you fulfill your duty to consult. And there's numerous examples that can show that how to do it. The TTN in Cochrane and what they've done in Canada Nickel. Superb examples of how that relationship is defined. Remember what the Chief Justice said. We've got to figure this out. If we're not talking, of course, we're not figuring out anything. Now, so we've gone from 3 years to 20 years. I move back again to the critical mineral strategy. This critical mineral strategy and the fact that as we move towards this, the proponents of the development of the road in the Ring of Fire, the proponents are First Nation communities, Webequie and Martin Falls. How beautiful is that? We've got Indigenous communities defining and controlling the duty to consultant in their traditional territories, in their communities. What gets better than that? This is how this will get done. This is how it will be successful. There's too much to lose. There's the area that Minister Wilkinson did not talk about, and I was surprised. Even though he didn't talk about it, what he did talk about really excited me because he spoke with a sense of urgency. Now, we all know that nothing is going to happen either without having a federal partner at the table with the province to ensure the development happens. We need a full partnership. A full partnership. I'm convinced Minister Wilkinson is a partner that I can trust. Things will happen, as they should, with their involvement. The area, of course, that he didn't talk about is what he's got, which has me concerned, because he didn't talk about the urgency with people, all people. Because every single year that goes by that we can't move projects forward, it affects every single incident, every single person in the service industry, in the producers, the explorers who have to raise funds that must be spent within a defined period of time, and it affects the Indigenous peoples. We know that every single parent wants a better life for their children than they had. And in my personal experience, that happens through responsible development. I've seen it with the Musselwhite Project. I've certainly seen it in northwestern Quebec. I've seen the communities that have benefited from the economic resources being developed flourish. And I've seen their kids flourish. And I've seen their kids have a better life. And that's the same objective every single parent has across the globe. Across the globe. We've got opportunities with people. We need employment. We know jobs are going they're unfulfilled right now because the demand for these products. One of the answers, of course, is immigration. In South Porcupine right now, there's 800 kids from India that are going to school at Northern College. 800. Fantastic. We want to see that happen. I support the federal government's proposal that by the end of this century, there will be 100 million people more in Canada than there are today. So slightly under 70 million people in slightly 80 years. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. We're just starting to recognize the potential within Indigenous peoples, the kids. They're the fastest growing part of our population demographically. I'm so happy to see the Indigenous schools being developed in Thunder Bay, private schools that are flourishing. And I'm sorry, it's 7 energies, seven generations. Yes, phenomenal group. Phenomenal group. There's all kinds of potential within our own communities to secure our future. We are staring at all of the answers. We just have to act. And we have to act together to ensure that we secure the future together. And understand, when I stand here in front of you, it's with great pride that I'm standing in front of you as the Minister of Mines. I'm standing here saying, we are the good guys. We provide the solutions. We can green the economy. We can green we can solve the climate crisis together here in Northern Ontario with full partnership with Indigenous peoples. It's right here, and Thunder Bay, of course, is the hub of it in northwestern Ontario, and Timmins is the hub in northeastern Ontario. That's my message. We talked about 3 things the Minister Wilkinson talked about. The 4th that wasn't mentioned, that's critical, and that's people and how we work together to solve our problems, to make our lives better at every single level. So folks, I'm George Pirie. I'm the MPP in Timmins. Very proudly the MPP to be serving Timmins, and very proud to stand up in front of you today as the Minister of Mines. I hope you've enjoyed what I've had to say. Thanks.